Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm the Community Outreach Librarian and Head of Technical Services at the Tewksbury Public Library here in Massachusetts. While we wait for folks to file in from the waiting room, let's take 30 seconds. And for those who are comfortable doing so, certainly no obligation, but if you're comfortable doing so, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from tonight. So feel free to type into the chat where you are watching from. And we will get started in just a few seconds here. Wonderful, wonderful, excellent. Keep them coming, keep them coming. There they are.
All Massachusetts.
Yeah, look at, well, it's the Massachusetts libraries.
Excellent, excellent. We'll have a couple sprinkled in from out of state and probably out of the country too. All right, so we'll get started here. Let me pull up the intro. All right, so good evening and thank you for watching. Tonight we're joined by best-selling authors Tess Gerritson and Gary Braver for a discussion on their brand new suspenseful thriller, Choose Me, and they're in conversation with best-selling author B.A. Shapiro. This event is organized by the Tewksbury Library in collaboration with the libraries of Andover, Billerica, Burlington, Chelmsford, Dracut, Georgetown, Groveland, Littleton, Lowell, Middleton, Newbury, North Andover, Rockport, Rowley, Salisbury, Tyngsborough, West Newbury, and Wilmington. Wow. And I also want to, yeah, I know, right? It's all about collaboration, right? And a special thank you to Megan Beatty of MB Communications for her assistance tonight. Wellesley Books is the official bookstore partner for tonight's event. When you purchase an autographed copy of Choose Me from Wellesley Books, 10% of your sale will benefit the library, the participating library of your choice. I will drop the order link in the chat multiple times tonight, and I'll also include the link in the follow-up email that I'm going to send to all of you tomorrow. Also in that email will be a link to a feedback survey. Please take 30 or 60 seconds, fill that out, let us know what you thought of tonight's event and what you'd like to see for future events with all the collaborating libraries. Just a couple of sentences about Choose Me to kind of whet your appetite. A psychological thriller, a whodunit, and a police procedural. Complicated with multiple points of view, Choose Me will delight both longtime fans of these celebrated authors and brand new readers. It's the story of an affair that leads to murder, but from both the male and female perspectives. Ooh, all right. So tonight's talk will last approximately an hour. Please type your questions into the Q&A box as we go along, and Tess and Gary will answer some audience questions towards the end of the hour. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our three best-selling authors for this evening. First up is B.A. Shapiro, our moderator, who's a New York Times best-selling author of 8 novels, including The Art Forger, The Muralist, and The Collector's Apprentice. Her 9th novel, Metropolis, will be released in spring of 2022. She splits her time between Boston and Naples, Florida. Next up is Gary Braver, pen name of college professor Gary Goshgarian. He is the best-selling author of 8 critically acclaimed mysteries and thrillers, including Gray Matter and Flashback, which was the first thriller to win the Massachusetts Book Award. His work has been translated into several languages. 2 have been optioned for films, including Elixir. As Gary Goshgarian, he teaches science fiction, horror fiction, bestsellers, and fiction writing at Northeastern University. He lives with his family outside of Boston. And last but certainly not least, international best-selling author Tess Gerritsen took an unusual route to a writing career. It wasn't until she was on maternity leave from her job as a physician that she began to write. Since then, she's written 28 suspense novels with more than 30 million copies sold. Her books have been translated into 40 languages, and her series featuring homicide detective Jane Rizzoli and medical examiner Maura Isles inspired the hit TNT television show Rizzoli and Isles, starring Angie Harmon and Sasha Alexander. Big fan of the books, Tess, and big fan of the show. I wish they'd bring it back, but it did wrap up properly, I felt. Tess, I'll throw in my opinion every here and there. Tess now writes full-time and lives in Maine. So let's give a big virtual round of applause to BA, Gary, and Tess. And BA, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you. That was a very nice introduction. And this is a great pleasure for me because both Tess and Gary are my friends, and there's nothing better than celebrating friends' novels, especially when they are good as this one. You know, I have all the cliches about it. I couldn't put it down. It was a page turner. It was just great. But who am I to say? So I have a couple of other reviews here so that you can hear what other people say. So first we have David Baldacci, and he says, Choose Me is a whirlwind of sharp, fluid prose and fine depth of character. The story is chilly, creepy, nuanced, layered, a puzzler in the first order, and above all, poignant. I mean, that's pretty damn good. And let's see, who else have we got here? Kirkus Reviews said that veterans, Gerritsen and Braver, unfold a painful and painfully familiar fable of adultery and fatal consequences. Got a starred review from Library Journal, which is not easy to come by. And they said, with deceitful characters and plenty of twists, this novel is highly recommended. I have a whole bunch more here, but I think you get the point of what's going on here. It really is fabulous. You should all just buy it. Get on there and get these autographed books. But let's talk. Let's talk about all of this. I'm fascinated, and I'm guessing that readers are going to be fascinated by the whole idea of two people writing a novel, and you know, the whole collaboration, which to me, in my controlled little world where I get to do everything, I just can't imagine how you did it. It's so seamless. I think the idea of having a male writer write the male character and a female writer write the female characters is also brilliant. So what was it like? And I know that you guys are friends. So what was it like to write a novel with someone else? Have you ever done it before, Tess?
No, and neither has Gary. We're both like you. We are control freaks. We want to be masters of our universe. So it's hard to split up work like this when it's very personal work. But let me go back and tell you how this all started. I don't think we ever planned to do a collaborative novel, but we had cocktails.
Always dangerous.
Yeah, that was a dangerous thing. We were at a cocktail party in Boston at a bookstore, and it was the height of the Me Too movement, and I was following it with great fascination. A lot of men were getting into trouble because things were being revealed about them, and I thought it'd be interesting to write a story about the Me Too movement, but in the gray areas of the Me Too movement, where it's, you know, not black and white. We just really don't know what happened between these two people. And I've always believed that story is really all about point of view. So wouldn't it be fun, I told Gary, if we told a story where the man had the point of view that was completely different from the woman's point of view, and we put that all together in a book? And what if we had a man write the guy part and a woman write the female part? And so, you know, you get a couple glasses of wine and before you know it, it's a genius idea. So, anyway, Gary got very excited about the whole idea, and he went home and he was the one who wrote the first chapter. So he wrote a chapter from Jack's point of view, sent it to me, and it just kind of went bouncing back and forth. Entirely done online. We never met up for this. A lot of reshaping as we went along. We had an idea, that the young woman would end up dead. We just weren't sure who did it, and we weren't sure how she died. We weren't sure of much of anything, but we just took it all and we just played with it. And maybe it was a year and a half it took us to do the first draft.
Right. Yeah.
So how did it feel for you, Gary?
I was just so excited to be part of a project with Tess that, I think the next day I was thinking about an outline. And, I proposed to her. We didn't quite know what the context would be. And because, Tess is a former physician, I didn't want to do the medical thing. That would be her part, even though the medical material in the book. So I suggested, how about an academic setting, and how about the old story of a professor and a student have an affair? And she liked the idea, and that's when I started with the opening scene, the first Jack scene in class, when Taryn Moore, the woman who is the victim, enters the classroom and his life, and it went from there. It was, as tested back and forth on emails. What was interesting is that this was done pretty much chronologically until we got toward the end, and our fabulous editor, Gracie Doyle, said, Tess introduced a female detective, homicide detective, Frankie Loomis, and that's like chapter 30 or so. Bring her up front. I mean, the advertising in the book is a murder mystery, so we know someone's going to die, and it's Taryn's going to die. So why just lead up to that and introduce this fabulous female detective in chapter 30? So Tess ingeniously moved things around and put Frankie and poor dead Taryn in chapter 1, and that became a kind of before and after, and that was the alternating, not just the alternating points of view, but the alternating time frames.
Yeah, it made it a lot more complex to read. It also made it very complex to put back together, because essentially we just if you want to take a movie making a metaphor for this, we had shot the whole movie from beginning to end, and then I had all this film that I had to splice and put back together again without giving stuff away. So I had to take stuff that was from the back of the book and move it to the front of the book, but I couldn't tell you what happened actually. And so there was a lot of machinery that had to fit together. But I think our editor's suggestion of bringing that detective to the front of the book and just putting it all out there. Yes, this woman is dead. Now let's back up and see how we got to this point. I thought that was very brilliant of her, and
worked really well.
Thank God for great editors.
Oh yeah, what would we do without them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't want to go anywhere without them. So Gary, I have to ask, what did your wife think of this plot that you came up with?
Kathy was thrilled that I actually had something to work on. So I wasn't going to have more story to tell. No, certainly she's tolerant. She thought it was an interesting idea. I mean, it is an old trope, as adultery is an old trope. And they're having stories of professors or teachers and students becoming lovers. It goes back to the 12th century with Abelard and Heloise. But we decided to pour a new wine in an old bottle. Execution is everything. Unfortunate pun, but execution, how you actually write the book, is different. And we did not want to vilify either one. Either Taryn didn't want to make her a flaming Jezebel. We didn't want to make Jack a irresponsible womanizer. And these were this is a character-driven novel as well as a page-turning mystery. And so we decided to do portraits in gray instead of black and white. And that is the layering. Tess's talent and my inspiration helped make this a layered, nuanced couple with other characters who are layered nuance. And Kathy loved the book when she read the manuscript.
I thought that the way the characters were developed was really good, because it felt kind of like, when you first meet somebody and then you have this idea of who they are, and then slowly the two of you eroded all of that beginning stuff and pulled out the inner layers of the characters. It was really, really well done. So Tess, why did you decide to make Frankie a middle-aged cop with two troubled daughters? How did that come about?
I was imagining Jane Rizzoli in 20 years is what I was.
Interesting.
What I love about a mature female character, especially somebody like Frankie Loomis, who's been a homicide cop for decades, is that she not only brings experience to it, she also brings her experience as a mother and an older woman. And I find, and probably a lot of women my age find, that as we turn 50, as we turn 55, people start to ignore us. They don't pay attention to us. We're no longer important. We don't have, as my husband calls it, the estrogenic glow anymore.
Gee, I wonder why that is.
And once you've lost that, it's as if society thinks of you with less value. So I wanted to have a character who was sort of in that situation where she's maybe not paid attention to, and she uses that to her advantage. And that's what I love about Frankie, is she'll go into a room with a suspect, and it's her and her male partner, who's a wonderful guy too. But the suspect always looks at the guy because he thinks, oh, she's just a middle-aged woman, size 14 pants, and I'm not going to pay attention to her. Well, Frankie is at work, and she's paying attention, and she's reading the room, and she is kind of like the secret weapon of this duo. The other thing that I liked about her, it had to do with the fact that our victim is a young woman who's 22. I wanted to make Frankie a mother, and a mother of challenging young women, because she is a mom of these two teenage girls, and she knows a lot how girls think, and her daughters are kind of wild. So she knows how to how to outthink these teenage girls. And she uses that wisdom to her advantage when she's trying to do pretty much a psychological autopsy on Taryn Moore.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So that all worked really well. And so, Gary, I don't think that it's going to take too much to know why you created a character who is an English professor at Northeastern. But so how did that work? And how did you separate yourself from Jack?
I didn't do or ever done what Jack did. and so it was, there was no memoir autobiographical material. When I first started teaching a long time ago, 40 plus years ago, professors not only dated, but they married their students, and no one really, everyone looked the other way. I mean, there was nothing written that you can't do this. And it was done. It was done. And ever since, Title IX came in, it became, you would protect people from racial discrimination, from ethnic discrimination, religious discrimination, but there was really not a gender protection that women would be, that the clause is non-fraternization in Title IX. That means you cannot date somebody over whom you have supervisory authority. You could trade sex or grades, and that is exactly what happened 25 years ago at Northeastern, and some guy got caught and he got fired. So I had a little bit of the background information. This is different. We have two very needy people, and we have Jack, who has a stressful relationship with his wife, and he's frustrated. He feels as if the romance has gone in their life. He's living a bachelor life again. And Taryn is needy. She has been rejected by men before and recently rejected by her boyfriend. And she's needy, and she is enthralled by Jack. And in spite of the fact that he tries to resist, he gives in to his own temptation. And that is the complication of his character.
Yeah. So also, I thought what you did a great job at was bringing in all that classical literature and the same issue of the man with control over the woman, and that Taryn was so annoyed with how these women acted, and then she was battling that out, and that you showed both sides of it,
right,
both sides. So
what's that?
So the class that you created, so Jack teaches this class, and I forget, what is it called?
Star-crossed lovers.
Star-crossed lovers in literature. And so is this a class that you taught or you wanted to teach, or?
It was, if Karen is going to take a course with Jack, I wanted a course that would be germane, that be relevant, that would have parallel and give some kind of artistic unity to the story that Tess and I are writing. So I came up with Star-Crossed Lovers, and it goes from antiquity up to Gone Girl. And the themes of the readings, Medea and Virgil's Aeneid, all the way through Abelard and Heloise up to Gone Girl, the themes are particularly reflective of what goes on in this book. There is unrequited love. There are women who are used and abandoned by men. There are women whose passion for love threatens men, drives them away, and they all end in tragedy. And the only exception would be Romeo and Juliet. They are lovers. They don't go after each other. So we have, what would Karen do? What's the polarity of Karen's possible reaction to being rejected by Jack? She could, as Queen Dido, who is in love with Aeneas. He decides he wants to fill out his legacy and found the city of Rome. He takes off. What does she do? She commits suicide on her funeral pyre. Then you get Medea in Euripides' tragedy. She falls in love with Jason. They get married. They have 2 children. He takes off with the Queen of Corinth. So how does Medea handle that? She kills the Queen of Corinth, the Princess of Corinth, and she slaughters her own children, which is an over-the-top revenge. And so it was either suicide or revenge for Karen as the pathway she would take. And she doesn't commit suicide.
Well, it sounds to me like you have been teaching that class.
I kind of liked it.
Yeah, well, if you weren't retiring, you could do it.
This is true.
So Tess, what was your favorite part about the collaboration, and what do you think that how that made the book as good as it is?
Yeah, I think what made the book work was partly that we did have such very different points of view about how men think about women and women think about men, and then being able to explore that. For instance, men think about women in a far more sexualized way than we are aware of as females. We think that men are enchanted by our grace and our charm. And I think their eyes are actually going somewhere else.
Yes.
But to have that reinforced and to realize, yeah, we're almost 2 different species in the way we think about each other. And so it was an education that way, but it was also fun just to brainstorm. And we didn't know who the killer was until 2/3 of the way through the story. And so that was the fun of brainstorming and saying, well, it's this one. No, it's that one. And we finally came to an agreement. But it was also being able to have our characters torment each other.
How much fun is that?
That was fun. I think the most fun I had were with the scenes where Taryn is really taking that knife and she's twisting it into Jack, and in an emotional way, and to see how he squirms. I mean, maybe it's fictional cruelty on my part, but I love to see characters squirming. And I made Jack squirm, and then Jack had to find his way and fight back. So that it would, in a way, it was a conflict that turned out on the pages between 2 characters that we had each separately created.
So you would write a chapter where Taryn was, as you said, pretty much sticking the knife into Jack. And then did you send that chapter to Gary, and then without having discussed it, and then he would read the chapter and then write the response?
We didn't really discuss our chapters before we wrote them. So he would just see, what did Taryn do now? And then he would have to react appropriately. So that was, I think that was a fun part about it. It was a lot of role playing. And also I think a lot about our characters were revealed as we were writing them. I don't do character sketches. I think they're really boring. So I just like to see how they develop on the page. And as things would happen, I thought, oh my God, Taryn's going to do this. Oh my God, what a bad girl. and you just follow it. You just go with the flow.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, I guess novelists do that anyway when we work alone. But maybe that's one of the things that made the book work so well, is that, when you're writing on your own, you do the setup. So you're not as surprised. And so when you got each other's chapters, it was just really clear, was it, that you needed, to screw her back?
Yes, right. The fun part for me was the guilt trip that Jack is on, and the self-flagellation. He has a moral compass, as opposed to someone who is stereotyped, stands up for the mirror. My cold wife or too busy wife it made me do it. Or Taryn, the sexy student, she made me do it. No, he stands up for the mirror and says, I made me do it. I'm the adult in the room. I'm the professor who's 42 years old, and she's 22 years old. I should know better. And you got Title IX, and you got your marriage, all these other two pillars of his life that he's now shaking. And so when Tess sent me stuff that Taryn was planning, vengefully, I had to deal with that and imagine, what if I were Jack and I had violated my wife, Kathy? This way, violated my marriage vows. How would I react? I'd probably blow my brains out, but instead I got this guy lived at the end and takes his own punishment. So I said the polarity was either murder or suicide. He is in his guilt thinking self-destructively, not to kill himself, but this is not going to end well, he says at the end of one scene. And it kind of doesn't, but it was the guilt that I imagined and I projected, multiplied by 100, that I think maybe made Jack sympathetic to an extent for readers. And and Tess knows her audience, it's 80% female. And I wanted to make at least the women who read this book say, okay, I can understand. Not that you're not pathetic, maybe sympathetic, I can understand it. And if not forgive, at least understand what he was going through. Yeah.
Actually, he is much more sympathetic than Taryn, that was for sure.
Well, everybody says, I don't like Taryn. And I thought, you think you're supposed to like her? Are you supposed to like a crazy person? But I think Taryn, and in fact, we came up with some discussion questions for book clubs. And one of the questions was, do you think Taryn is a victim? Do you think she's a villain? Do you think she's both? And I'm sort of taken aback by people who say they need to identify with her. Well, to me, it's a little bit strange to feel that you need to identify with the stalker. But maybe it's something ingrained in all of us, that when there's a Me Too situation like this, we women feel we automatically have to identify with the woman, when in this particular book, that may not be what you should be doing. So I think Gary had a really difficult job in this story, because he had to make Jack the good guy. Jack really is the hero of this book. He is the central character. He is the everyman that we are supposed to identify with. But he's done something wrong. So the challenge was to make this man likable, to make this man, to make us identify with him, and to make us feel his panic and his guilt and his desperation. And maybe think yourself, how far would I go to protect my life, my marriage, my career? Would you consider pushing this girl off a balcony if it's convenient? I have a feeling that there's a certain number of people who go, yeah, I might do that.
or commit suicide, which is kind of what I thought might happen. So there were so many different possibilities. But also, I felt for Taryn. I think you did a really good job of, she was, really awful, but yet I think she was a victim in her own way, and she just didn't have the skills. She just didn't know any other way except to lash out like that. So would I want to hang out with her and have her as a best friend? No, but I really liked reading about her, and it rang true to me the same way Jack rang true. And this is something else that I think you both did really well, is that, the characters are full. we're not all good and we're not all bad. And so everybody in this book, including Frankie, has their good sides and their bad sides. So,
I think it's writers are told often, be sure you write a likable character. Above all, your character must be likable. Okay, I'm going to do that too. and my response is, what about Scarlett O'Hara? Did anyone really like her? But we all wanted to read about her. So it's not likability so much as they're complicated, they're fascinating. We can't turn our eyes away from them. And Tarrant, I didn't write her to be a sociopath. I mean, she's not psychopathic. She's just a complicated, very wounded, very needy young woman who in her need doesn't know her boundaries. And we all know people like that, or I guess some of us know people like that, and hopefully we keep them at arm's length unless they're, but we know people like this, and they're not bad people. They are needy, and in their neediness, they can hurt others. And that was how I approached Taryn. I don't think you necessarily have to like her, but I think you have to be interested enough to keep following her and asking yourself, how far will she go?
And, I think that that's something that is applied to women in real life and female characters in novels, that you're supposed to be likable, but that could be really boring. I mean, to say in this book, Jack had just, done all the right things that he felt guilty for afterwards. Where's the story? So sometimes these likable characters, it's not really a good way to go. No.
Now, the Tess mentioned Scarlett O'Hara as a female model for not likability. The male model, we Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. That is the most brilliant manipulation of readership that I've ever read. This guy is a cannibal, a psychopathic cannibal, but he loves Florentian art. He loves, sculpture. He loves painting, fine wine. I mean, he's a connoisseur. And everyone was rooting for him at the end of the movie, and kind of rooting for him at the end of the book too.
I think that, so I'm actually a sociologist, and I taught a class in deviance. And one of the things that you learn in a class about deviance is that even, Hannibal Lecter is fairly normal the rest of the time. That you're doing these horrible things, but the rest of the time, most people that are doing, they still, call their mothers on Sunday and eat breakfast, and, and I think that goes a long way in trying to love your villains,
Yes, right.
Which, I think that both of you did, which was really good.
Most villains don't get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, look in the mirror and say, that's the face of evil.
Right. No.
I have been cheated. I was born on the wrong side of the track. I had a lousy upbringing and my boyfriend left me, et cetera, et cetera. So I deserve more.
Yeah. And also the villain is the hero of his or her own story. That just may not be the story that you're telling, but to them, they're the hero of their story.
Mm-hmm.
And so what about Frankie? Tell us a little bit about Frankie, Tess.
Oh, well, okay. Frankie is what I imagine myself to be if I were a homicide detective. What I loved about Frankie is that she's so ordinary. She is, she's 2 kids. She's a widow. What we don't know about Frankie from the very beginning, and we get hints of it as time goes by, is we find out that her husband died under rather embarrassing circumstances, and that it revealed something about her marriage that she was not aware of. And she is living with this pain of him having betrayed her. And it's pain that she doesn't want to talk to her daughters about. She doesn't want to ruin their impression of their beloved father, but she knows that everybody in her homicide unit knows the truth. And so that's sort of not only pain, but embarrassment that her husband was cheating on her. So it's that complexity that Frankie brings into the story, and also that bias, because she's been a wronged wife. she is all on the side of wronged wives, and she is out to get Jack because she figures out Jack has been, a naughty boy, and she wants to be on the side of Jack's wife. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that are going on in Frankie's life that are going to affect the way, her attitude toward this case.
Well, also for Frankie, that whole revelation about her husband mirrored everything that was going on in your story. The same way that the Heloise and Abelard, mirrored. So I thought that, that those juxtapositions, the theme, the Me Too stuff and the not so Me Too stuff was really well done. You guys did a really good job at this.
I have a confession to make, and that was none of this was planned. Gary, I don't remember in the aftermath of having worked on this book for a year and a half. I don't remember when we came up with things or how these things fit into place, but I don't recall even thinking about Frankie's background until I started writing, and it just kind of came out that she had that, her widowhood was based on something that was very painful.
Well, I think part of that for both of you is that you're veterans, and there is some muscle memory that goes on when you've written as many novels as you've written, and written so many good novels.
I think it speaks to, when you're a writer, to trusting your subconscious, to trusting that somehow you will pull it out of the back of your brain and it will show up and you'll go, well, of course, it was always meant to be that way, but it wasn't there to begin with. And there's a lot of instinct that goes into writing novels where like putting the gun on the mantelpiece 5 chapters before you actually use it. We are constantly doing that as writers. We're planting little things that little tools, leaving the tools around the story, and then coming back to them and realizing that, yeah, they're pretty handy. I'm going to use that.
And then you forget about it and you go, ooh, did I really see that? I must be brilliant. Well, I think that it's time to turn this over to audience questions, but I just want to say that this has been a real treat, and I congratulate you both and wish you the absolute best with this book that is already a bestseller and is going places, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, BA. I have the honor, the privilege of asking some of the audience questions. Jay would like to know, is this book part of a series or is it more of a standalone?
It's a standalone, yeah.
And a follow-up would be, do we smell another collaboration in the future?
You know what? It was so complex to do it as a pair. I think both Gary and I could write our own single books much faster. So it was really, really complicated. I mean, it was a wonderful collaboration, but we both realized it was a lot more work and we would be turning in a lot fewer books.
Right. We each have a few irons in the fire too. So Tess is writing a book. She's got another one coming out next year. I'm writing a couple of books. So, we have our other projects.
And speaking of the complications surrounding this collaboration, Colleen would like to know, did you give each other final say about the chapters you wrote?
I think I made a lot of suggestions for Gary's chapters, primarily trying to soften up the male aspect of what Jack Dorian was and try and make him more likable to the female audience.
And that's what I gained from collaborating with Tess. I mean, that I wasn't as certain about how it would be received by her readership or even our editor. And when she said, I think you should make little changes here, I did, and they worked.
I did the final edit, especially the rearranging of the timeline.
Right.
Jack has another follow-up question here. Gary explained that when he agreed to team up, he wrote an outline. Tess, however, seems to be more of a panther. How could that work?
I think the outline I wrote was probably just a suggestion of a story arc instead of, individual chapters. There's going to be an affair, there's going to be tragic consequences. It wasn't a step-by-step kind of outline. When I write a book, that's what I'm working on right now, I made a very scanty outline. I used to outline in rigorous detail, which is ridiculous. I had a 100-page outline, and twice that, 3 times that, you have a book. So now I just have a sense of an arc of where I'm going. And I started, and I stopped usually about 2/3 through, knowing that my subconscious, something will be able to come out that I will know exactly how this is going to end, and I'll get there. Just confidence. I did it before, I can do it again. Yeah. So I don't outline in any extended way.
Well, Gary may have had an outline. I didn't have one. I wasn't following any outline.
Great question from Teresa. And BA, you can also get in on this one. What is the best piece of writing advice you received that you still use today in your own writing?
I know what mine is. Mine is,
well, what is yours, Barbara?
get your butt in the chair and stay there.
Yeah,
and
right.
let yourself write it wrong.
Mhm.
And those are the things that I tell aspiring writers all the time. And I have to force myself to do both of those.
Right.
I'm along the same lines. Well, except that I always say, I don't stop to edit. Just write that first draft. Get it down on paper, and because you can always, as Nora Roberts, the genius Nora Roberts says, I can fix a bad page, but I can't fix a blank page. So just fill in that page.
Right. I think what I do is I try to determine what my main character would like this book, how would like this book to end, that what would be his way of ending this book. And then I throw in as many obstacles as possible and try to torment them. The two points I give to my students are these, that there is an outer quest and there's an inner quest. An outer quest, if it's a detective novel, who laid the body of Karen Moore in the opening scene, and go through the moves of trying to put together the puzzle pieces. The other is much more personal. It's an outer quest and an inner quest. If you have some kind of baggage you want to somehow just jettison, guilt, bad relationship with children, bad relationship to a lover or spouse, guilt that your partner got killed in the last investigation, something that is going to really weigh you down and also to humanize you. So the inner quest is a humanizing quest, and the outer quest is a more professional quest. And I tell my students, do that. Always know those two B's, the direction you're going in, and that might at least help you get a story arc and a character arc. And at the end, they should be somehow sadder and a little wiser.
Excellent. So a couple of questions regarding some of your characters. Jay would like to know, do either of you have a character that you connected with or was a favorite in the book?
Well, for me, it was Frankie, because Frankie was me.
Right. And for me, it was Jack, because he was in my head for an awful long time. Got to know him pretty well.
That was a pretty easy question.
Right.
So Mary has a follow-up. Would Tess consider writing more of the Frankie character on her own?
I don't know. I mean, I love Frankie. I mean, it's a possibility. I really think that Frankie would make a great television detective. But no, I don't have any plans right now. I just finished another Rizzoli Niles book, and I'm also working now on a brand new female character, maybe a start of a new series, a retired female spy.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for the tease and for the breaking news there. It's excellent. So Colleen has a really deep question. She wants to know, what did this book teach you about yourself?
I think it taught me to give up a little control.
That I could write a character who is riddled with guilt that still comes out okay, that I kind of sympathize with and like him. I rarely have a protagonist who has done such wrong in the past. There are always villains who are outside of the main character. And I think that I learned how guilt can make one empathetic, and so it was a challenge I took on. I think came out okay, and I was pleased with that. With Jack.
This next question will be for all three of you. Jay wants to know if you could collaborate with any other author other than each other, who would you choose?
Oh, boy.
Yikes. I'm waiting for a call from Stephen King any day now.
That's a tough question. I don't, how do we answer that?
I have never seen myself ever as a collaborator until Tess said you want to do a book together. Nor do I see myself doing that again. I mean, as Tess said, and Barbara said, we're control freaks. We create our own universes and we feel comfortable in them. But that being said, I felt very comfortable in Tess's universe too.
And so similar question. So Diane, I guess we'll skip the first part, but the second part of the question, we've touched on some of the negatives, but what were the best parts of the collaboration between you two?
Well, there are a couple. First of all, I only had to write half the book. Yeah, the hard part, Gary took the hard part, and that was addressing guilt, addressing male guilt. And that, I'm not sure I could have done that nearly as convincingly as he did. But I think the other part I liked about it was just that the book took directions that I maybe would not have thought of myself. Some of the guilt, the scenes between Jack and his wife, those I think were the most powerful ones as we get towards the end when she finally finds out what happened. I mean, the pain of that marital scene was something that I think, Gary hit it right on.
I am so grateful that Tess did Frankie. She has had numerous female detectives, of course, the whole Rizzoli and Isles series. I could never have done Frankie. It would have, it would have been pastiche of other female cops I've seen on television or people I know, and I try to make them a cop, and they're really not. So that just came out of her. It just burst forth from her forehead, and it was a perfect character for this book, and her backstory, and the sadness in her backstory that just related so well to what was going on in Choose Me.
So Gary, our friend Megan would like to know, since you're a professor, did you have to run the subject matter by your university? And what do your colleagues think of the storyline?
No, I did not. I had thought at one point to make it Northeastern University, and that was a very bad idea. So I made up a university, Commonwealth University. My colleagues, I haven't heard from them on this. This is not the kind of book they read. And so I don't know. I hope they read it. A few students have read it, and they're very complimentary. But no, I haven't heard it from my colleagues.
I wonder if they're suffering from guilty consciences, and this is bringing it to the forefront.
And Gary, it's only been out for 5 days, right? So perhaps you'll hear from some of your colleagues. Yeah. Tess, question for you. This was sent through the chat. And maybe you could expound on this a little bit, but Mark says, I was at your physician's writing workshop with our dear friend, the late Michael Palmer. Tewksbury, by the way, has hosted Michael and Daniel before. Great guys. Anyway, Mark is curious if any of those attending that event went on to release any novels that you know of.
I know there was a Canadian doctor who released a novel that was published traditionally. I don't know. I'm not aware of any. And it is a reminder that being a successful novelist is kind of hard. We had this is the thing. This is the course for doctors, not MDs, who were interested in learning how to write novels. And doctors are smart people. They get the rules very quick. They are literate people. But I think that the course maybe taught them that it's not as easy as everybody thinks, that even if you have all the tools at your disposal, there's an art to storytelling that maybe has nothing to do with your education. It has everything to do with how many books you read as a kid, and it has everything to do with what I call the art of the sense of the dramatic. And that is something that only a few people have. And Michael always pointed that out to me, that the sense of the dramatic is the #1 thing you need to be a storyteller.
So John wants to know when you're not writing your own bestsellers and having them optioned into movies and television shows and doing virtual and in-person book tours, who do you read, and who are your favorite authors?
I'm reading Lisa Unger right now. I recently discovered her, and she's terrific. I read Michael Connelly, and I'm reading Alexandra Sokoloff, who's written both science fiction and good thrillers. And she is a first-rate stylist, and she's also a screenwriter. So her dialogue is just so crisp, so tight. And those are the 3 people I'm reading right now.
Yeah. Well, I have another thing here for Lisa Unger, Lisa Gardner. I love female authors, but I also like Linwood Barclay. I think he's a fantastic writer, and he's from Canada. And of course, my hometown, my home state, Stephen King, and a very fantastic author here who writes about the Maine woods called Paul Dworin.
Barbara, did you want to add your favorite authors at the moment?
Asking who your favorite author is like, who's your favorite kid. But I am in awe of Elizabeth Strout. I just think she is amazing. In terms of male authors, Richard Russo is one of my absolute favorite people. And I'm a really voracious reader. That's basically, if I'm not writing, I'm reading, and I don't do a whole hell of a lot else. But and so who I like changes all the time, but those 2 are always there. And I even, I have one of Elizabeth Strout's book on my desk here, because she does character like nobody does character. And I read, I pick it up and read it to try and help me, but I can't do it like she does. There's no way.
And so BA, not to put you on the spot, but would you like to give us a 30-second synopsis of your spring 2022 book, Metropolis, that's coming out?
I don't have my pitch yet, but it's different from my past books. There are 6 different major characters, and they don't really know each other, but they are all connected because they have something to do with the self-storage facility, which is in Cambridge, Mass. And they're all different. They're Black, they're brown, they're white, they're gay, they're straight, they're rich, they're poor, they're, completely different people. But something happens at the storage facility that pulls them all together and also rips them all apart.
Well, I'm certainly interested. That was a good tease right there.
Okay.
So we have a few more questions and a few more minutes. I don't want to get too much into spoilers here. I want to be careful with some of these questions. Janet says, at one point in the book, I had thought that the dead person was the wife because both of them were pregnant. Did you ever consider switching the victim?
No.
That never crossed.
Kayla would like to know, what was your biggest struggle with your characters in the book?
Well, I said, good, Tess, yeah.
I think mine was making Taryn somehow relatable, even though she was a difficult young woman. I mean, she does bad things, but we need to sympathize with her.
And mine was just making Jack somewhat understandable, somewhat sympathetic in his guilt.
Yeah. And last but not least, we'll ask Lynn's question. Lynn was the first person to type a question in, so we'll make sure to get to her at the end here. Very specific question with a page notation and a direct quote. Around page 53, you write, "Silence is a coward's way out, and that's what Liam chose to do." Do the authors agree with this? If someone is really stalking you, isn't it best to ignore them and not engage them?
I think I wrote that. Silence to me is ghosting. I think that Liam chose to ghost her, and he did not choose to just come out and say it's over or explain to her why they were breaking up.
Great, excellent. Well, I think we will begin to wrap it up. For those that are on the line with us, let us know in the chat if you enjoyed tonight's event. We always like to read positive comments before we wrap up. And speaking of positive comments, everyone who's here with us live will receive an email from me tomorrow with a link to a feedback survey that'll give you another opportunity to provide feedback. Let us know what you thought of tonight's event and what you'd like to see for future events. I want to thank the 15 participating libraries, and I don't have the list in front of me, but I certainly mentioned them at the beginning, and I'll mention them via the email. Also want to thank Megan Beatty. I want to thank Jane from Wellesley Books. And most importantly, I'd like to thank BA, Tess, and Gary. Do any of you have any last words before we wrap up?
Just watch out for Rizzoli and Isles number 13 next year, called Listen to Me.
And what about you, Gary? What are you working on?
I just finished a book called Served Cold. Hopefully it will come out sometime next year. We haven't got a publication date yet.
Excellent. And we know we're looking out for Metropolis from Barbara sometime this spring. So want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Right.